Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Happy Saturday, ladies and gentlemen. I thought that I'd go over this because it seems like it would be a good thought exercise. 6 totally insane things that will happen if our power grid goes down. And this article is over a year old, but I thought that we would visit it. I don't ever remember going over this. That way, if there's anything on here that is left out, be it from personal experience or be it that you learned it from somewhere else, you can leave it down in the comment and we can help each other as a community. This is how we get better prepared, by looking at things that can happen in the future. Just like what happened here in Bangladesh. Bangladesh's power grid collapsed and about, 140 million people or so. Let's see, it says here, the power grid has failed and completely collapsed in Bangladesh, leaving around 140 million people without power. And I just looked this up and they ended up getting their power restored like a day or two later, something like that. But what would happen, ladies and gentlemen, if our power went out for weeks or months or even over a year? It's very possible that that can happen, especially with the hyperactivity that the sun has been experiencing in the last several months. Right now, we are at the height of this solar cycle, which means that this is the time when the sun is most active. And you've probably been hearing or reading about how the sun has ejected a coronal mass ejection here, there. This is a big one. This is a small one. We just got thrusted with an X1 solar flare here, I think a couple of days ago, and an X1 is actually the lowest solar flare in the highest category. I do believe that the X category is the highest, but it goes all the way to X9. Now, we were to be hit with an X9 solar flare, which is what I believe hit us back in 1859, the Carrington event. You can look that up. We were saved because we were not as high of a technological world as we are today back in 1859. And the only real losses were that all of the wires from the telegraphs during that time, because at that time they had telegraph. So if today something like that were to happen, if we got a solar flare like that, especially with the diminishing strength of our atmosphere right now is not at full strength. I think it's at like 20 or 10% strength. So it wouldn't take a solar flare the size of the one that occurred during the Carrington event for something similar to that to happen today. And if it did happen, ladies and gentlemen, do a little bit of research. It would take a very long time for us to be able to repair or rebuild our infrastructure. So I think this is very relevant that we think about what are the things that we have to look forward to in case something like this actually happens. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I haven't read through this on purpose. I wanted to read through it originally as I was recording this video, but take a look at this. I did read through this part right here. If our society suffered a widespread power failure that lasted for weeks or months, it would be no different for us than if we were suddenly sent back to the 1800s. It would be a strange and dangerous world, and for the average person, it would catch them off guard in the following ways. This is why we prepare. Cycles happen all the time, and you all know that I'm a cycles person. I like to study cycles, and we are overdue for a massive solar mass ejection or a solar mass eruption, however you want to say it, that actually makes contact with the Earth head on. It would be devastating, to say the least, and many people would perish. I'm sure that most of you who are watching this video are of the preparedness mindset, but to those of you that may not be, this is something that can happen for real, and it will happen again. It will happen again. The laws of averages say that this will happen again to Earth. And as I stated before, do your own research. Number one, we are overdue. And number two, our atmosphere is not as strong today as it was back during the Carrington event era in the late 1850s or mid 1850s, 1859. The first thing that they go with here, and a lot of these things we already know. Like the major category, we already know. But what are the intricacies within those major categories? All right, that's what I'm after here. And the first one that they cover is all commerce will cease. The ATMs won't work, the banks won't open, and the cash registers won't work. For a while, cash will be king. But if the crisis goes on for more than a few weeks, then people will view it as worthless. We'd be back to a barter economy in short order. I want to make a comparison to this with something else that I've been talking about lately quite frequently. This here is if we have a coronal mass ejection that hits the earth and shuts down our grid. Everything that I just read to you off of this first paragraph here, the ATMs won't work, the banks won't open, the cash registers won't work. What do you think would happen if we have a banking liquidity crisis, ladies and gentlemen? Same thing. It would be the same thing. It won't be a coronal mass ejection. We would still have electricity. But the ATMs won't work. The banks won't open. The cash registers won't work. Because if the ATMs aren't working and the banks aren't open, more than likely debit cards and credit cards are not working as well. So cash will be king. And I believe that, personally, I believe that we will be hit with a banking or financial system liquidity crisis before we are hit with something like this. And the second one that they cover, ladies and gentlemen, is communications will shut down. If you think that you can rely on your cell phone to work during a disaster, i.e. a coronal mass ejection, think again. In a crisis when everyone instinctively reaches for their phone, that limit is quickly surpassed and the radios on the tower get sluggish. And they say here, mobile analysts estimate that a cell site can handle 150 to 200 calls per second per sector. When a large group is making calls at the same time, the network cannot handle the number of calls. More importantly, communications with police, firefighters, and ambulance services will cease. All communications will cease, ladies and gentlemen, unless you have communication devices like ham radios or even walkie-talkies, right, in a Faraday cage that you can then take out afterwards. How well do Faraday cages work? I really don't know. And I don't think that a lot of people know who have studied this, because in reality, we just haven't gone through this in the past several, probably 10 generations or so. However, without ordinary citizens calling them to protect or to report crimes and emergencies, they will be helpless watching their communities burn down around them. It won't be long before they give up, ditch their posts, and return to their families. And here they're talking about the LEOs and the first responders. I've talked about this before. What happens if cash goes to zero, right? Because in this instance, cash pretty much goes to zero, right? And they're progressively going, further and further along as the electricity has been out longer and longer. Cash will eventually go to zero. People will care not about it, but they will care about the things that they have prepared. Our policemen are going to work for free. Our Secret Service people are going to work for free. Our politicians are going to work for free. Right, ladies and gentlemen? So this is another thing. This makes a lot of sense. But then I'm sure that there's a lot of other forms of communications that will go down that we really don't know about. Like, for example, even satellite communications will go down. Why? Because that coronal mass ejection will destroy those satellites before it destroys the communication here on Earth. Number 3, probably the more important of the ones that I've talked about so far, electricity. All forms of fuel that our society relies on will stop flowing. All right, which means what? No electricity. Research on how you can protect your solar panels from a CME or an EMP. There is a way to protect it, of course. Probably having some in a Faraday cage would probably be good. But from what I understand is that even if they're not in a Faraday cage, but they're not hooked up to a solar generator or batteries or anything like that, that they will make it through. But then again, how do we really know that? Now, some of the things that they say here maybe is not 100% accurate for everything. Like here, they say all of our vehicles will be dead in the water. And more importantly, the trucks will stop delivering food. Now, it depends what kind of vehicles you have. If you have newer vehicles, I don't remember the year. I think it was like 1984 or 1978. Anything before then pretty much didn't have any electronics in it. Those vehicles will more than likely be able to work. But the newer vehicles, it's been found that since there's circuitry and there's so much computer stuff in the newer vehicles, their circuitry are so delicate that they'll pretty much melt with all of the radiation, and I think it's electrons coming down, raining down on us. The grocery stores will be stripped bare in hours, not 72 hours, in hours, and will not be replenished for a long time. Even if you live in an area that is rich in agricultural resources, there may be no food to be had, since those farms rely on fertilizers and farming equipment that must be delivered by trucks. And this is why we talk about preparedness. because this can actually happen. Number 4, and of course, most of those farms, I would say all of them, will lack water, as will your plumbing. For a couple of days after the power goes out, you will have running water, since water towers rely on gravity to feed the water to your home. However, electricity is required to clean that water and pump it to the tower. Once it's out, that means that you won't be able to flush your toilet. So not only dehydration will be a major threat, but without the ability to remove human waste or wash your hands, every community will face daunting sanitation problems. And everything he said there, I have to say that it is accurate as far as I'm concerned. Number 5, when the grocery stores are stripped bare, right? This is when it's getting to the nitty gritty. The grocery stores have been stripped bare. If something like this were to ever happen, ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, if you make it through the first 60 days, then all you have to worry about then are the marauders, right? In all honesty, if you make it through the first, let's say 30 to 60 days, you and your little community, once that 30 to 60 days is over, all you have to worry about, of course, as far as replenishing your resources and all that kind of stuff, that's separate, but you'll have to worry about the marauders, the people that prepped with bullets and guns because they think that they're going to go ahead and make their living now in this new world by robbing others. That may happen and they may be successful for a little bit, but in my opinion, in the long run, marauders and bad people in general will be thinned out. So when the grocery stores are stripped bare, the pharmacies won't be far behind. Millions of people who rely on life-saving medication could die in the weeks and months that follow. But perhaps more shocking is what would happen to the people who aren't using drugs that are immediately life-saving. 13% of Americans are using opioid drugs. What are they going to do when those drugs aren't available? Many of these drugs that they're taking, pharmaceutical drugs, RX, prescription, they are very addictive. And when someone has addiction, they very quickly lose control over their behavior because they're not getting that thing that they need in order to fix themselves. And they say these drugs are highly addictive and cause horrendous withdrawal symptoms. Another 13% of Americans are on antidepressants, almost the same thing. And likewise, the withdrawal symptoms are pretty problematic. In other words, within a few weeks after the grid collapses, about 25%, listen to this, just within a few weeks, just from people that don't have the drugs and stuff that they need, that they are technically addicted to, in my opinion, 25% of your neighbors are going to be in an awful mental state that is not conducive for survival. That is something, ladies and gentlemen, that a lot of people don't think of, all right? And number 6, he says, finally, one of the most shocking things that people will have to deal with is the lack of GPS. And this one kind of caught me by surprise right here when I just skimmed through it. But let's go ahead and take a read. The GPS satellites will probably keep running, but eventually the devices that read those signals will give up the ghost. Well, now I'm not sure if the satellites will keep running unless they are very protected against CME, and maybe they are. These days, people are pretty reliant on GPS for directions, and there aren't as many paper maps laying around. The average person is going to be utterly lost if the grid goes down. Now, I would say that that would be a case for someone that's maybe far away from home, that's making a trip or something, and they don't have a paper map. But I think that the first 5 that they went over is a lot more serious than this one right here. All right. In summary, law and order will break down at every level and death will be around every corner, which is another thing that you have to prepare for. What are we going to do with dead bodies? I forgot the name of the gentleman. I think it was the gentleman who wrote the book 1 second after, who said in Congress that if we had a severe coronal mass ejection, that within a year, the population of the United States would be reduced by about 90% because we rely on power, ladies and gentlemen. We rely on electrical power in order to power all of those things that we are now used to living with in this technical world that we live in. It's one thing to grow up and live in an era that lacks electricity, but to be sent back to such a time on a moment's notice would be one of the most challenging things that a person accustomed to modern amenities would ever face. I bet you that there's a lot of people out there that are like, this would be no problem. We could make it through this no problem. But just the mental aspect of this happening. Just the mental aspect of you not having that normalcy that you have grown accustomed to. Even us preppers, we have our normalcies that we enjoy. We have our normalcies that we are accustomed to. So unless you have a really good supporting network of family and friends and community, then it's going to be very tough for you to make it. You could be surrounded by all the people in the world that have good intentions, but unless you are part of that community, of that supportive community, be it a big family, a big community around you of friends and people that are like-minded, it will be very stressful in your mind. A lot of people think, oh, we won't hear planes flying around anymore. We'll have good silence and stuff like that. But think about it. You've lived in this world the way that it is now for your entire lives. And for the switch to go off just like this, try finding yourselves in that new world. So for example, go to a very dark room where the light is turned on. Turn on the light. You can find yourself anywhere you want to go. The light is on. But now, go ahead and rearrange that furniture and turn the light off. And see how easy it is for you to navigate through that dark room. In a way, it would kind of like be the same way with a solar mass ejection that takes out the grid to the entire world. Now, why do I say to the entire world? Because I do believe that if any one country, for example, their entire grid goes down, and it's not, let's take any kind of geopolitical issues out of the way or anything. Let's say that the whole world is kumbaya and that we all love each other as nations and as people. Imagine that, ladies and gentlemen. But let's say that it's just one country that goes down for whatever reason. I don't think it would be as terrible because other countries would come in to help. I would like to think that. That's probably not a fact in the world that we live in today, but I would like to think that. But if it's the whole world, it's everyone for themselves. And I'm not going to get into it on this video on how long it would take for things to be restored. But ladies and gentlemen, I would say at least 20-25 years. The transformers that we use here in the United States, the main transformers for our main power grids, those things are huge. They need special equipment just to move them. Whenever they do move them, they need to widen roads, and it takes a long time for them to be built. And we don't even build them here in the United States. I believe that the main transformers that are built in South Korea. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I think it's in South Korea. And if something like this happens, and the South Koreans did have the ability to build these transformers, which take, I believe, anywhere between 12 to 18 months to build one. If they had the ability to build them, who do you think they're going to build them for first? So where in line would your country be at if it needed transformers to replace everything within its national electric grid? So it would take years. I don't think it would take 2 or 3 years. I think it would take a generation. So prepare, ladies and gentlemen. This is actually something that can happen. Let us know in the comments what other things you think may go wrong during this kind of an event so we can learn from each other. Having said that, I hope you have a great Saturday. We will see you all tomorrow on Sunday's live stream at 9 a.m. Alaska time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Other than that, have a great day. Remember to be good to each other. When good people do good things happen. Remember to reach one, teach one, and repeat. If we all did this, the world would be a better place, and you know that it will be a better place. Many blessings to every one of you and your families. God bless you all. Have a great weekend. I'm Alaska Prepper, and I'm out. God bless.